My older brother, whom my family always idolized, once hired a private investigator to expose me as a failure. Instead, he uncovered my unexpected success. I grew up in a small town with my two siblings. As the middle child, I often felt overlooked. My father was a hardworking but emotionally distant man, now considering retirement. My mother, on the other hand, was devoted to maintaining the household and the traditional values she was raised with. Despite loving them, I never felt like I met their expectations. My brother Lucas was the golden child. At 40, he had a picture-perfect family, married to a quiet, reserved woman with two athletic sons. He worked as a car salesman and constantly offered me unsolicited advice, treating me like a struggling project. He boasted about his big house, fancy cars, and active lifestyle, making me feel even more like an outsider. In contrast, I was the sensitive, non-athletic kid who was bullied and left out. Having asthma made it worse, and my parents never took it seriously. I also struggled with depression and always felt overshadowed by Lucas. School was difficult, and I barely graduated with a 2.5 GPA. I tried college but dropped out in my second year, which caused a major family rift. My younger sister, Olivia, was the family's princess. Though not a bad person, she adopted the same dismissive attitude toward me as the rest of the family. She married at 19 and now has 3 kids. I relate most to her middle child, who, like me, often feels left out. After leaving school, I embraced my passion for geek culture, working at a comic book and video game store until it closed. My family still acts like I work there, though I've long since moved on. I co-founded a successful IT company, which was eventually bought out by a larger corporation, leaving me with stock options and over $1 million in assets. Now, I work as a CTO for a promising startup, live modestly in a 2-bedroom home, and drive an old car. Despite my success, my family continues to treat me as the underachiever. Every Sunday, my parents expect me to visit, even though it's a long drive. These dinners are filled with lectures about how I should settle down, marry, and be a real adult. If I miss one, they imply I'm ungrateful. My accomplishments are either dismissed or misunderstood, and back home, people still believe I work at the long-gone store. Lucas constantly interrupts me and pretends I know nothing about business or technology, reinforcing my status as the family disappointment. Last month, Lucas decided to dig into my background, hiring a private investigator, likely hoping to find proof of my so-called failures. Instead, he discovered my financial success. Ironically, I work in cybersecurity and quickly traced the unauthorized attempts to access my records. Furious, I hired the same agency to investigate him. What I found was shocking. Lucas was drowning in debt, behind on taxes, and had a file with Child Protective Services. He had multiple prior arrests for DWIs and domestic disturbances, and his financial situation was in shambles. My parents, on the other hand, lived modestly as I had expected. I arrived at the next family dinner prepared for a confrontation. To my surprise, my parents treated me with newfound respect, as if I had suddenly become the golden child. Lucas, clearly distressed, tried to reclaim his status by boasting about his commissions and supposed promotion. I congratulated him and casually mentioned his financial troubles. His reaction was explosive. When I handed him a copy of the report, he denied everything at first, but I pointed out that he had essentially recommended the same agency by hiring them to investigate me. Watching my parents shift their allegiance so quickly was unsettling. They reprimanded Lucas, but never acknowledged how they had mistreated me for years. The dinner descended into chaos. Accusations flew and long-buried family tensions erupted. My brother eventually lost control, shouting that I should have never been born and blaming me for all the family's problems. My parents desperately tried to calm him, displaying a level of concern I had never seen before. As I sat through the turmoil, I felt no victory, only exhaustion. In exposing my brother's flaws, I had also exposed my family's hypocrisy. While I had spent years longing for their approval, I now realized how hollow it was. The shift in their treatment of me felt artificial, and for the first time, I questioned why I had ever sought their validation in the first place. I felt both saddened and vindicated. It was a painful reminder of the deep-rooted issues in my family. My parents accused me of refusing to help a sick relative, something I had never even heard about. No one had asked me for help, yet they insisted I had chosen not to. I suspected they were making things up but didn't bother to argue. Instead, I reminded them they still thought I worked at the comic book shop that had closed over a decade ago. They had rewritten history to fit their narrative, and it was exhausting. On the way home, I felt overwhelmed. I knew my parents would now pressure me for financial support, just as they had done to my brother. Yet, I couldn't ignore that they had provided for me growing up. Balancing gratitude, resentment, and new boundaries was going to be difficult. I would need my therapist's help to navigate this shift. Growing up, I was never the favorite. My brother mistreated me, and my parents turned a blind eye. They dismissed verbal abuse as insignificant, which made it even worse. After years of enduring this, I realized I needed permanent distance. I wished them well, but knew I had to move forward without them. The thought of building my own family one day made things more complicated. If I found someone special and had children, how would I handle introducing them to my estranged family? I had many questions about the future. If your family only values you for what you can provide, they don't truly appreciate you. They only want me around now because they know I'm financially stable. I've built a good life for myself, and I won't let them manipulate me. I'll stay in touch with my therapist and keep my boundaries firm. Moving to a new city and starting fresh might even be a good idea. If you're struggling with family issues while dating, you're not alone. It can be difficult to explain family estrangement to a partner, especially if they have close ties to theirs. But when the time is right, I will create my own family, one built on love and respect, not guilt and obligation. In the meantime, I've taken precautions. I put a security freeze on my accounts in case my brother tried to access my financial information. I've consulted a lawyer to ensure my assets won't automatically go to my parents if something happens to me. I've also prioritized therapy, knowing that detaching from my family will come with emotional challenges. After a particularly bad family argument, I stopped attending dinners altogether. Over the next few weeks, I focused on my work and mental health. My home, filled with comics and tech gadgets, became my sanctuary. My therapist helped me establish boundaries, like building a fortress rather than a wall. Then, I met Ava at a tech conference. Her cybersecurity talk captivated me, but it was her balanced perspective on family that truly stood out. As our relationship deepened, we strategized on how to reintroduce me to my family without getting pulled back into their dysfunction. We started with brief coffee visits. Ava's presence made interactions more manageable. My parents were overly polite, as if afraid I might disappear again. My brother seemed unsure how to speak to me. However, my sister and her kids were a welcome distraction. Her middle child, who looked a lot like me, quickly warmed up to Ava. These short visits allowed me to reconnect without getting entangled. Over time, my family adapted to this arrangement. Perhaps they realized it was the only way to keep me in their lives. They started respecting my boundaries. With Ava's support, I envisioned a future built on mutual care rather than obligation. One summer evening, as we walked by the lake, Ava and I discussed moving in together. I reflected on how far I had come, from feeling abandoned to standing on my own with a clearer sense of self. The change was profound. Though challenges remained, I faced the future with cautious optimism. Family dinners still happen, but on my terms. Sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. When I do, Ava comes with me. We handle any issues together. Things aren't perfect, but I've learned to maintain balance, engaging without losing myself in the chaos. Now, I focus on my own happiness. My life is mine to build, and I intend to create a future filled with love, respect, and healthy boundaries.